All right. Before we begin the sermon, I also want to say hi to Dan. Dan is back here just for a couple days. Dan has been part of Grace for a very, very long time, so I'm sure many of you know him very well. Welcome back, Dan. I think he's leaving tonight, right? So, and I think John and Debbie are back as well. I'm not sure. Hey, they're here. Yeah, welcome back, John and Debbie. They've been away for quite a few months, and so praise God that they are here in our midst again. It's really good to see you again, John and Debbie. We're continuing on in our word-by-word series. This is the second part on forgiveness, and forgiveness had to be two parts because it was just too much to unpack in one message. I was not able to do it. And so, as you can recall from last week, everyone knows this verse. Peter came to Jesus and says to him, "Lord, how often will my brother sin against me and I forgive him? As many as 7 times?" And Jesus said to him, "I do not say to you 7 times, but 77 times. Some of you might have heard 70 times 7. It's depending on how the Greek is translated. So it might be like, okay, 490? Does that mean on the 491st time, I do not need to forgive this person? What does this actually mean for Christians who are trying to do forgiveness? And in order to understand this, we had to talk about, help. In order to understand this, we had to understand that Peter is asking this question not out of the blue. Peter is asking this question because Jesus had just given a 4-step SOP, a standard of protocol, for what to do when your brother sins against you in the church. Now, you remember in step 1 is to go and talk to that brother, that person, one-on-one. And if, he listens and repents, then you have won over your brother. And step 2 is to bring 2 witnesses, 1 or 2 witnesses, to bind and loose things in the presence of witnesses and not to triangulate or to strong-arm the other person into repenting, but to really figure out what has happened. And so the witnesses are meant to be neutral. And if that still doesn't work, the 3rd step is to tell it to the church. And if it still doesn't work, then it goes on to the 4th step. Now, the really interesting thing about these first 3 steps is that if in any of the 3 steps the person is repentant, the Bible teaches us that Jesus says you must forgive. The person is repentant. The person is very sorry. The person is listening and willing to change. And in this sense, we must forgive. And what we kind of went over, the different misconceptions for forgiveness last time, that doesn't, just because you forgive that person, doesn't mean you have to trust them 100% again with whatever that was. It doesn't mean that you will suddenly forget what happened, right? It doesn't mean that suddenly you have rebuilt 100% back to normal that relationship. It just means that you have canceled, you don't hold it against that person. Their slate has been wiped clean. Are we okay to go on? If not, it's okay. And then so this past week at least for me, in our small groups, it was very interesting to hear the discussion on it. And it was like, how many people actually do this? And it was very interesting to me. My wife has a friend, and she's going through something in regards to her marriage, or her former marriage. Oh, everything okay? The forces do not want us to go through this message today. We will push through. Nothing will stop God's word. And so in all of this, there was this sense like, okay, who actually does this? And then so I was asking my wife, because she was dealing with all this unforgiveness, and I said, well, did she do the steps? And my wife said, Joey, who does the steps? And I was like, wow, this for us to be Christians, and we have this very clear SOP, but there are many reasons why we don't actually go through them. So my wife's friend, she's Taiwanese, but she's married to a Korean. So there are cultural issues here. She's very hard in her when she's talking to Korean culture to do even step 1. You just don't do that. It's too confrontational. It's very uncomfortable. And so even step 1, forget step 2 and 3, even step 1 in that culture, you just don't do. So how do we even wrestle with forgiveness if we can't even follow the steps? So I'm not saying this is very easy to do. One time I was in a volleyball tournament, and then for some reason my friend got very upset at me. And then I didn't know why. He was just very mad at me during the tournament. And when we went back after the tournament, it was, I stayed over at his place. We're all in the living room, and then I asked him, hey, what happened at the tournament? Like, did I do something wrong? Did I offend you in any way? And then he was unwilling to talk about it. He's like, do you want to talk about this? Because I don't. And I was like, okay, I'm trying to be reconciled to my brother, but it doesn't mean that people are really willing to go through these steps or admit their wrongs or to right wrongs. So in all of this is not something very easy to do. And so at the end of the message, we went on to the 4th step. After the 3 steps, there was unrepentance. And you would think that the 4th step that Jesus would teach would be, and if he still doesn't repent, forgive him anyway. Immorality or greed, idolatry, etc. And so what he's saying is that it's not that you have a license and a mandate to therefore withhold forgiveness. It's that by all means, this person is now an outsider. This person is no longer a brother. This person, out of all these 3 steps, out of all that, is to be treated like an outsider. Doesn't mean that he has no hope, but it means that he is no longer a brother, and let God judge him. So in a sense, there is quite a lot of protection. There's quite a lot of protection in these types of cases. And so for Christians, it's not that, okay, I'm going to forgive, and then this is what we should do. There's certain protections. There are protections for yourself, for the community, and then I would think, okay, that's kind of how we deal with that. But in the Bible, there are quite a lot of other passages on forgiveness that we have to reconcile with this narrative. And one of the key narratives is, how do we understand these other passages where, forgive us, like the Lord's Prayer, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And so we're going to go more deep into exactly what this means for forgiveness. Thank you, Frank. Hey, big hand for Frank for figuring this out. Okay, we're here. If your brother sins again, surprising conclusion. And this is that 1 Corinthians 5 passage. This man bears the name of brother. He is still saying, hey, I'm a brother. But he is completely unrepentant, unwilling, and still doing sins that even the pagans are ashamed of. And he still calls himself a brother. This type of person you remove and you treat as an outsider. Does that sound very harsh? That's the Bible. Too bad. Okay? Let's pray. Father, thank you that we can enter into your word. Thank you that we can really wrestle with this concept of forgiveness. And it is very hard. This is a very challenging passage to try and understand. By your Holy Spirit, please help us to know more about what you would like us to do and what is the reality of our lives that you want us to live in. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. So in response to Peter's question, Jesus says a parable. This is also known as the parable of the unmerciful servant. It says, therefore, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his servants. When he began to settle, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. And since he could not pay, his master ordered him to be sold with his wife and children and all that he had, and payment to be made. Oh, man. And so the servant fell on his knees, imploring him, have patience with me, and I will pay you everything. And out of pity for him, the master of that servant released him and forgave the debt. Now, first of all, in order to understand some of these terms, the first thing we need to know is, okay, what is this? What is a talent? Let me pull up my notes here. This is a talent. I had to kind of look it up because I was like, I don't really know what that means. We use this word to mean like, oh, it's like a talent that people have. Back then, this is a talent. A talent was not a currency. It's not like I pay things with a talent. A talent was a measurement of weight. So I used to think, oh, in the parable of the talents, where one person has 1 talent and 10 talents, I used to think it was like one big thing. It's a you have 1 talent of gold, 1 talent of silver, that's very rare, right? So, but it's a weight equaling to 1 talent. And in order for us to understand, well, what would be this talent? So 1 crown, a king's crown, made of all gold, that weight would have been to be 1 talent. So the talent is the biggest weight possible in that kingdom. The entire kingdom would make about 9,000 talents, 900 talents in 1 year. So how much does this guy owe? He owes 10,000 talents. What is that? So 1 talent is about 6,000 denarii. 6,000 denarii is 20 years of work, because 1 denarii is 1 day. So if this guy owes 10,000 talents, he has to work 200,000 years to repay this debt. 200,000 years. And he falls, he's like, please have mercy on me and I will repay. Yeah, you're going to repay that. Really? And so the amount of debt that's accumulated here is beyond calculation. How did he even accumulate this? He must have been some sort of very, very high manager or something to accumulate this much debt. And so not 10,000 talents. And this amount is so big that it's not even just he who's going to be thrown in jail, even his wife and kids. Imagine having a debt so big, your wife and kids have to be thrown in jail along with you. This is just beyond imagination, the debt that he owed. And he pleads for forgiveness, and what does the king do? The king has compassion and forgives the debt. So the big question here is, what does that mean, he forgave the debt? Where did this debt go? This is a lot of money. Where it just disappeared? It went, when you forgive a debt, the word here in the Greek is to cancel. So he's canceling. It's still in the books, but it's canceled. It's like crossed out. And then he is able to leave, and he is forgiven from this enormous weight of debt. Now, what happened? You would have thought he would have been very happy. He got 200,000 years worth of wages, boom, off his back. You would have thought he would be running out into the streets, shouting for joy. What an amazing king who did this for me. Everyone, please, like, this king is so amazing. Instead, he goes out, and the same servant, he finds one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. 100 denarii, that's about 3 months. 3 months' wages, okay? And seizing him, he began to choke him, saying, "Pay what you owe." So his fellow servant fell down and pleaded with him. Again, same exact motion that he just did with the king. Same thing, just the rules have reversed. And what do you think this servant said? "Oh, as the king have forgiven me, please go." He says to this servant, "I refuse. I refuse. You owe me. You owe me 100 denarii." And he put him in prison until he should repay the debt. Now, what is this denarii? This is a silver coin. And in that day, we have to understand it's kind of a mix of cultures. So you have many different types of currencies. The Roman Empire ruled that land, so the denarius became the kind of the standard one-day kind of wage. Now, this is a very big coin, right? You must have other types of coins. Now, in the Jewish temple, they used a shekel, right? And so the shekel, in terms of if you were to do a money conversion, is equal to about 4 denarii. And the reason why they wanted to still use the shekel is because in the temple, they wanted to use coins that didn't bear the image of like another quote-unquote god or Caesar and things like that. And so that's why at the Jewish temple, they had money changers, because all these people are coming to buy the sacrificial animals, but they all have denarius. And so they're like, you must change your coins into this shekel that we have. And that is why Jesus, when he was at the temple, he was so furious at the money changers. Because these people come to God's temple to sacrifice with penitent hearts, and the money changers are really giving them a bad deal, right? Maybe instead of a shekel being 4 denarii, they would really change the currencies and really make it unfavorable. And Jesus was very, very upset at this. They had to change all this money, and then the money changers, who are supposed to be representing God, gouged them out. And that gouged them, and they had no choice but to accept all these very bad rates. And so Jesus was furious at them, and this is the shekel. There was one more coin that you might have heard of in the Bible. This is the lepton. Now, the lepton, there were other sort of smaller coins in the Roman world. The smallest Roman coin was called a quadrant. And this, in terms of payments, would be 1/64th of a denarius. 1/64th, that's like a penny. Now, there were also Greek culture. The smallest Greek coin was called a lepton. Right? A lepton was half of the smallest Roman coin. So you had a lepton, which is 1/28th of a denarius. 1 day's wage divided by 1/28. And this coin is also known as the widow's mite. So when the widow, this is how poor she was. She had 2 1/28ths of a denarius. And that's all that she had. And she gave it all to God. And so Jesus is pointing out this woman has given more because she gave out of all that she had. But other people, all they saw was the 2 smallest coins possible. So is this a sizable amount? I'm a little sick, by the way. So you have 3 months. You have 100 denarii. I need some water. Hang on. You have 100 denarii, so it's not really that unsizable. It's not like a lepton. Hey, you owe me a lepton, I'm gonna strangle you. This is kind of sizable. And so when we're talking about forgiveness, at least in our small group, it was like, hey, it's not really like these small, passable things that are really insignificant and petty. We're like something that's kind of sizable. You can feel the pain, you can feel the debt. You can feel something that is owed. Are we okay? So then the people are very upset. I'm going to continue on with our passage. I'm going to read straight from the Bible. And when the servants discovered what had happened, they were greatly distressed. And they went and told their master everything that had happened. Then the master called the servant in and said, "You wicked servant, I canceled all that debt of yours because you begged me. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you?" In anger, his master handed him over to the jailers to be tortured until he should pay back all he owed. And this is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive a brother or sister from your heart. So what happened to that other servant's debt? Because it wasn't forgiven, it remained on him. That's why he was able to be thrown into jail. The unmerciful servant, his debt was canceled, so it went onto the books of the actual king. So this is what it means when you forgive a person, you cancel their debt, but it's very hard because it means that wrong, that wound, that injustice that goes onto you. It's a separate issue to seek justice or reparations in a court, but when we're talking about forgiveness, this is something that is not 100% related to people seeking justice. It's a forgiveness that you do. It's a work that you do personally on your own books. So here, Jesus says, this king should have done this. And why did you not do that? My mom told this story when she was a kid. So when she was a kid, they had, my mom's parents are very strict. And so when they did things wrong, her parents would go into the kitchen and take a piece of chalk and write the word 罪, which means sin, a huge one in a circle, and then just write that there. And then the parents would make her stand in that circle until they said they could leave. Another thing that they did is they had a closet, and in that closet, it was like kind of Japanese style, so in that closet, you would lock them in there to punish them for the wrongs that they did, and then until the parents said you can come out. And so one time, my mom is still scarred to this day. She said one time, her older brother, did something wrong, and she knew he was going to get thrown in that closet. So she went to that closet and she said, "No, don't throw him in there," and then she was crying for her brother, and then, all this mercy, and then the next time around, it came to my mom did something wrong. And then they're right in front of the closet. And what do you think my uncle did? So you would have thought, oh, he would do the same thing. He opens the closet and says, "Here, I'll open it for you. Throw her in there." Now, is he wrong? No, based on what was supposed to happen, it's not wrong. What she did still requires that consequence. But what was very hypocritical of him was to receive a type of mercy and not give mercy in return. And this is the thing that we really need to understand here as Christians. When the Bible teaches phrases like this is in Matthew 6:14. This is right after the Lord's Prayer. Jesus says, "If you forgive others their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you." And then in Mark 11:25, "And whenever you stand praying, forgive if you have anything against anyone, so that your Father also, who is in heaven, may forgive you your trespasses." Now, this is a very challenging question. And the question is, does this mean that us forgiving other people is a condition? It's a condition for receiving God's forgiveness. If I don't do this, then God will withhold his forgiveness from me, and I won't receive God's forgiveness. Is this what this means? So as Christians, we need to understand, how do we interpret this passage? Is this a prerequisite? Are we each going to be unforgiven? We have our debts. If we do not forgive our brother, then we all have no hope. It is really hard. Like, I was personally very challenged by this. I was like, wow, there is still, even for me, there is unforgiveness in my heart. I don't know your stories, but there's some things that I'm very willing to overlook, and then there's some which are more weighty, getting into the 100 denarius or more type of category, where I'm like, no, I really don't want to forgive these people. You don't understand, they really did wrong by me. And what I want for them, I want justice for them. I want them to feel the pain that I felt. I want them to understand the pain that they caused me, and I want to see some sort of reparation. And it feels kind of good, like I have this chip on my shoulder. I have a grudge. And then I do a lot of things out of this anger and this pain. And is that really the right way to live as a Christian? So here's what I understand from this, what this means. When the unmerciful servant has received this forgiveness, we might think, well, how does that even relate to me? And when we remember last week, sin is not just things that are very willful. Sin involves anything that you miss the mark. So our standard as God's creation is perfection and holiness. Even if we commit a sin of commission or a sin of omission. There are things that we should have done, but we didn't do. There are sins that we don't even know. Every time we miss the mark, that is one count. And so we add all these things up together. And the iniquities, not even the things that we do, the things that we think, the things that we wonder, the twistedness that we think about, even if we didn't even act on it, that's called iniquity. And so we wonder, okay, exactly, what is that for me? And so this is how I interpret this question, and feel free to talk about it in your small groups or ask me. Forgiving and receiving forgiveness are actually the same thing. You cannot in one breath say, I receive this forgiveness, and in the other breath say, I withhold forgiveness. If you believe in the forgiveness of your own sins, then you must also believe in the forgiveness of others. You cannot say to God, give me mercy and give me grace, but give that person justice. How can a Christian do that? It's the same side, it's the same coin to receive forgiveness and to give forgiveness. If we say, hey, don't, when we do all these wrongs and we say to God, hey, this record has been wiped clean, but this person, I'm still counting. Don't count my sins. Count that guy's. Look at all the tick, 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 tick. Count that person's. It's getting to 490, isn't it? And so in one breath, we cannot, in good conscience, say, please don't count my sins, but count this person's sins. Count this person's sins. But I want to be scot-free. So it's the same when we, it's not that if we withhold forgiveness, it's that posture of no matter what, even if the person's repentant, even if there's different steps that are taken, I will not forgive this person. Then do you really believe in your own forgiveness? The Lord's Prayer says, and forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. How can we who have received something and know it is good also not be able to give it? So this is something that Christians understand. And so how much do we owe to God? I was wrestling with this question. How much do we owe? And a lot of people will say, we owe God our lives. We owe God everything. And I've said this too. But if we look at the scriptures, you know how much we owe God? Nothing. We owe God nothing. Everything has been wiped clean. He has wiped it clean, and he just wants that relationship with each and every one of us. How do I know this? Colossians 2, verse 13 to 14. If you want to share about the gospel, you can share this verse. And you who were dead in your trespasses, the wages of sin is death. We're deserving of death and separation from God. You were dead in your trespasses and the uncircumcision of your flesh. God made alive together with him, with Christ, having forgiven us all our trespasses by canceling the record of debt that stood against us with its legal demands. This he set aside, nailing it to the cross. I'll read that last part again. By canceling, forgiving the record of debt that stood against us with its legal demands. On the cross, Isaiah 53, the suffering servant. This is Jesus. This is the prophecy of Jesus. He was pierced for what? For our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace, and by his wounds we are healed. And we all, like sheep, have gone astray. We have turned, everyone. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God in different ways, in his own way. And the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. So what happened to that debt? We learn it didn't just disappear. It wasn't just canceled. The debt that the unmerciful servant really needed to understand eventually is that this debt was paid by Jesus Christ on the cross. And so because we believe in the gospel, we can come before the Lord. And I've heard many times in Taiwan, they say we owe God this, they say in Chinese, they say 福音的债. And they say we owe this debt to the gospel. And the Apostle Paul kind of alludes to that. He's like, I feel obliged to do all the things that I'm doing because he feels so grateful. But it's not a debt. How are you going to repay the debt to the gospel? 200,000 years. How are you going to repay that? It has already been paid in full. So what it means for the parable of the unmerciful servant and us is how much did that unmerciful servant believe that he owed God? If he believed, he went out of there and he still believed he owed a lot, he had every right to go ask, Jeremy, you owe me this. Austin, you owe me this because I still owe this huge debt. I have to repay it. I would not fault him for that. But if he truly believed that his debt was canceled, he would not have acted in that way, especially such an exorbitant amount. The other thing, he possibly could have taken it for granted. He's like, oh, maybe this didn't really cost something that much. And so when we realize the cost that it took for us to be redeemed, the cost for our salvation, the cost for Jesus, right? For one man's obedience, that many will be made righteous. When we really, do we walk out of here? Do we walk out of here like, are we truly free? Or do we tell our friends and our kids, hey, we owe something. We have to repay God somehow. As the woman who was with the alabaster jar, she wasn't mandated to do that. All of her worship and adoration was because she was forgiven much. So I don't know how much that is understandable for us. I got to tell you, I am still wrestling with this. And I have to wrestle with God. I'm like, wow, if I don't forgive that person, do I really believe in your forgiveness of me too? And I beat myself up a lot. I'm very hard on myself. And I'm like, oh, I did this wrong, and I did this wrong. And I just look at I count my own record. Forgiveness and love keeps no record of wrongs. Why would you look at yourself with that record when God has already wiped that record clean? When we walk out of here, do you really believe in the forgiveness of sins and the grace of God? And if so, what does that look like for how we live our lives? Let's pray. Father, thank you for loving us. I thank you that we can understand more of your grace and your forgiveness. As our name of our church suggests, I pray that we will be conduits of God's grace. We are able to do this not because we are so majestic or great, but we know how costly it was. Father, when people have wronged us, help us to really wrestle with that forgiveness, especially if it's kind of weighty. And then as we say, we help and we minister to one another, hey, I know what they did was wrong. I know it's unjust. I know it's not fair. And I'm so sorry you had to go through that. And what they did was not okay. And to forgive will be very costly. But for your sake and understanding your freedom and your being a conduit for God's grace, will you try? If you continue to live in that grudge, or do we continue, God, to live under your grace? Father, please help us as a community understand this, how costly this was, how hard this is, in reality, how difficult this is. Therefore, we will do it better. Holy Spirit, please help us. I pray our brothers and sisters will encourage us and journey with one another as our stories are being shared in all of our life groups. And just help us to just rally around each other and do this really hard work of forgiveness. Thank you that you died on the cross for us, that because of you we can have life eternal, we can have a relationship with you that is full of joy, and that our slates are wiped clean. Thank you that you look at us and you count us as righteous. What an amazing gift. We can come before you as righteous people, even though we owed 10,000 talents. What a king you are. What an amazing gift you've given to us. Please help us to share this good news and liberate the people around us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Let's stand.